This is Ree here. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate everyone, and thank you so much for liking and subscribing. It really helps me a lot. And don't forget to check out my website, paradoxastrology.com. I am a professional astrologer, and I can help you anything. Okay, let's get into this video. So I just want to talk about quickly what really wealth is. And I do a lot of the mantras to Lakshmi to really figure this out, because I've had the experience of having a lot of material possessions and money, but I never felt wealthy. And it didn't matter. It wasn't that I didn't have enough money to feel wealthy or anything like that. It didn't matter. I could have $1 billion and never feel wealthy. And I always wondered why that was. Well, the times that I had the most money, I wasn't really that enlightened. So I was wondering why, how could I accumulate all this money if I wasn't enlightened? Because we're taught the opposite. We're taught to look up to people who are billionaires and millionaires, and that they have some kind of secret we don't have, right? So we kind of interpret that in a way, if you're a spiritual person almost, that they have the ability to, like the law of attraction says, to attract more than you. You have to make yourself like a magnet, that they figured out how to make themselves like a magnet and you didn't. It's your thought. You're not thinking wealthy enough. Just so many different things. And none of that is true. I'll tell you, the most enlightened people in this world, one of those, there's probably tons I don't know about, but that I know about are the Siddhas of the Himalayas, which are the immortals. They are completely self-sufficient because they're taught the deep occult knowledge since they're children, and they live out in the mountains, and it snows. It gets so cold. A lot of them live in caves. Some of them live under the ground in the snow, and they'll live in there during the winter. And then they'll come up, and you'll see there's pictures of them wearing just nothing, loincloths and everything, and walking in the snow. They can read minds. They can travel through time. They're completely happy people. They have found bliss. They are considered the complete human being. They can do miraculous things. I hope to go visit them or meet one day and be trained by one day. That's one of my thoughts. But when you think about how they live, now, when you become enlightened and you become very self-sufficient, your sun starts shining from within. You don't need to look outside of yourself for sun, for leadership, to feed your ego in any way. Your ego has dissolved and you're completely self-sufficient. There's nothing that you need on the outside. So when you are like that, you become a different kind of person. You don't have to have your 80-room mansion and 30 cars. You don't have to do that, because you start seeing things different. Those who have to have the access wealth, the abundance of wealth to the extreme, that it's like you have all these cars, you don't even drive them. You have all these houses, but you can't stop purchasing them. It's because you haven't found who you are inside. The people who are the most enlightened, who have the ability to manifest anything, don't manifest those things. And you have to really think about why that is, because they don't feel a need outside of themselves. And you wonder, well, how come the person the most enlightened is living in a cave? Because they're the happiest with nature. Once you become enlightened, and I'm not saying I am enlightened by any means, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying from my perspective of raising my level of consciousness and from my understanding and from my readings and my meditations. Once you get to these periods, you become one with nature again. And you start seeking out the real abundance, which is nature, and living how you were actually meant to live. We weren't supposed to live and have to need all these outside things. They say fame and extreme wealth stop you from enlightenment, because you get to the point that you need all this stuff to consume and to keep you going. When I was making tons of money and then I had all these bills coming in and stuff like that, it's just, you're always paying so much just to be yourself. And you think that it requires all these things. So your identity starts to be all of these things. Like you'll see people online, oh, I have a Bugatti, I have this many cars. Now your identity is completely dependent on the material things on the outside that you've accumulated. So now you're going more on the outside and further away from who you are, because the key to real true power is within. So now you're going to think that you're going to need more and more and more to be who you are, and which is the opposite. It's from going within. Now, if you acquire wealth by going within, filling yourself up with knowledge, higher consciousness, and understanding the lower chakras, the lower parts, the shakti energy, and combining them both, and they come together. That's when you find your true power. Once you find your true power from within, then you are able to materialize things, but your priorities will be different. Coming from an ego standpoint, like say you've never had money and you're kind of in your ego, you've never kind of experienced the higher self, you will think, well, what are you talking about? I just need to have these things and then I'm going to feel this way. You may think that, but once you do the practices and you have a routine and then your consciousness starts opening up, your chakras start opening up, there comes a realization that I don't need anything. And you spend more time with nothing. Now, the most important thing to you becomes silence, becomes presence. That's where the wisdom comes from. Now, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with material abundance. The material world should be celebrated as well. The material world is very important because it gives us the Maya, and the Maya in turn shows us the truth. Through the illusion, we see the truth, and it's very important. Also, all the physical realms like nature and everything like that is very important. Your body as well is very important. So you have to honor the material. But that's the thing. Once you start, a lot of people who start making money in ego, because those things don't fulfill you, now you're consuming more, not just buying things to make yourself feel more of yourself. Now you need to consume because now it's your identity. You're that guy with the new car. You're that guy with 15 cars, or you're that guy that goes on the jets. Now that's your identity. Your identity is not that though. So it's very important to find out who you are without those things. And that's why enlightenment comes with giving up the material world in a lot of circumstances. It comes from the death and then the rise, which is kind of the story of Jesus, and the story of the death of the ego and the rise of the phoenix, which is the higher consciousness, or the shakti energy, and the reaching the higher consciousness. So there comes a realization that you are only filled from within, and that these other things you never needed in the first place. So the higher you rise, the more you're going to not need these things. And you're going to realize that these things actually almost weigh you down. So that's why being known too much, being known by too many people, it drags you more into the physical world and stops your enlightenment. There's also other things that will come up if you have too much fame or you're known by too many people. That's why the most enlightened people don't come into our world. Like they stay in the Himalayas or they stay in the caves and they don't let anyone come through, and they look at us as ignorant. Some of them look at us as evil, and they would be correct. Ignorant, yes, some of us are evil, not all of us are evil, but very ignorant to the way the world works and the connection that we must have with nature. The more we fulfill ourselves with all these things that are not from nature, that are just manufactured things, and we fill ourselves with plastic, we fill our houses with plastic, we fill our everything, all these material things that aren't of a higher frequency, it lowers our frequency. So then now we think that we need more, and that's the answer. So I feel bad for younger generations right now. The materialism has gotten insane, very insane, and it's all about how you could be high value. What's a high value man? And to think that a high value man is a man who has 15 cars and no knowledge just shows the destruction of society. A real high value man, look at the siddhas of the Himalayas. That is a high value man. Some of the siddhas do live in the material world too. Some of them live in houses, live a normal life. But if you talk to a man like that who's completely enlightened, or you listen to him speak and the training that they had to go through to understand themselves and understand the occult and all the practices, and that is a high value man. A high value man is a man who knows themselves. A high value man is not a man who lusts after the material world. That is a very lost man. That is a lost person. Your value comes from within, and if you don't find it, how can you conquer a material world if you don't know your own power? You will never know your own power by buying things. You will only know your own power by sitting down in silence by yourself. That's another thing that we're always taught, that you got to find somebody, you got to couple up, you got to get married, you got to have a family. But how can a man support a family and understand a family if he doesn't even know himself? if he doesn't know what compassion really is, if he doesn't know what love really is, he's going to bring up another generation of lost children. Don't expect a man to be able to protect and provide for someone he doesn't know because he doesn't know himself. That's just what I wanted to say about my thoughts about that. But I thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.